what do you definitely know is true? You definitely know that the celebration of that sort of evil happening to an innocent man, you know that that's evil. You can't, that people celebrating that is, and there's no amount of caveat that makes it okay to celebrate Charlie Kirk's death.
Well, hey, everybody, welcome to One Life Network. And in the course of my lifetime, there's been a few moments that I consider pivot moments in culture and history and everything else. And the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I think, is one of those. Just watching how the response, even throughout the world, has gone. It kind of caught me off guard because I'll show my cards that I was mildly familiar with him. I knew him as a cultural figure. We reacted to one of his videos, one of the conversations that he had with someone on a college campus. I knew he did that kind of thing. But beyond that, I personally wasn't, just up to speed on who he was or what he did. I had a pretty good gist, but not in a lot of details. And we're watching people react in extremes one way or the other. And we also saw, we're talking on a Monday, and it's Sunday church. Our attendance was up. I pulled up in the parking lot. Thought, oh, wow, okay. And I did meet a young lady who said, I'm here. I haven't been to church in a long time, not into this, but I'm here today. And she came up to me, and it was helpful, and it was good, and all the rest. So we want to have a conversation starting there about why. Why is that? Why did people feel the need to go to church in response to this? People would maybe run the exact opposite direction, but why do you think that is, and what's going on? We'd love to hear your comments on that, wherever you happen to be coming from. So why were people, I think if we tested the attendance records of churches all over the nation yesterday, they'd be up. So what do you think's going on with that?
Well, obviously we saw that with September 11th, those of us who remember that event, and I was 20 years old. We got to preach that Sunday, and I just remember looking out on a packed house, and we were in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. I understand it was that way across the board. I've actually seen a couple of people asking, like, is this true that churches were up yesterday, or is that just some sort of like a strategical thing that people are saying? No, it's true. We were packed out yesterday, and by the way, our pastor, who happens to be an incredible man, who I hope you get to know someday, hey, Brett's right here, and Brett just preached an incredible message, I thought, on that. But anyway, yeah.
Incredible. Well, and I think it's because last week in general was a very dark week for people. Mm-hmm. And we are naturally, because we're made in the image of God, if we're taking a Christian worldview here, which we do, but since we have that innate need for worship, but also you might not realize how dark it is when you get used to it, kind of like the whole frog in the boiling water effect. And then seeing the death of Irina Zarutska, and then seeing the school shooting in Colorado, plus that school shooting a couple weeks before at the Catholic school, and then the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I think people just felt the oppression and wickedness of the world. And that inclination of the image of God, I think, does kick in to one degree or other and says, I need light. I need something that brings healing. We need love. And the one thing that Christianity has always taught is to love your neighbor as yourself and pray for those who even despitefully use you, and pray for your enemies and love your enemies. Right. So I think people were kind of feeling that, kind of congregating to that. And I will say everywhere, every corner on the internet, I'm seeing it everywhere. Everyone's going back to church. Wow. So many people are going back to church everywhere. Just scroll through X, YouTube comments, people, I haven't gone in 15 years. I thought I'd never go back, but I'm going back this Sunday.
Wow.
Bought a Bible. Yeah, a lot of different people saying about Bibles. I'm going back for the first time. Yeah, there's a lot of those.
I need to pay more attention.
Comments out there. And I think there's just a pull of, a pull towards church because the violence that they've seen that week, okay, our response can be more violence, but they've seen that doesn't work, right? That's not the thing that we want to espouse to. So we're like, okay, so where do I turn? And what you said, there's love that's supposed to be kind of the foundation of the gospel. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. We're supposed to do those things. And I think when we do those well, people come in. And what you said about 9/11, the thing that I was worried about with yesterday, was because after 9/11, it was the biggest drop-off of church because they everybody showed up at the church and they felt that either the church didn't address their core need of finding hope in the midst of that, or the church just didn't address it at all, what was happening in the culture. And so it's this isn't relevant to anything going on in my life. And so again, I do appreciate what you did yesterday of threading that well. And it is hard because it is a political charged thing, but you have to point people to Jesus, which you did well with that yesterday. So thanks.
Well, in the conversations that you guys had, what were people looking for? I mean, you think or what did they say or comment? Like, I'm here at church. Did we hit that? I mean, and I'm not looking for compliments in the sermon. That's not the issue. It's more like, okay, what did people find what they were looking for, at least in some kind of microcosm way? Do you think? Did you have any conversations that reflected that?
Based on everything I've seen in the conversations I've had with some people, one is that some people really did love Charlie Kirk, and they said, you know what, I want to make Charlie proud, and I feel like I haven't. So I'm kind of like, okay, but make it about Jesus. But I'm glad that somebody is if a person can be the catalyst that gets you in a better relationship with Jesus, yes and amen, right? Because that's the whole point of the evangelistic enterprise. But the other thing I'm seeing with a lot of people is hopelessness and healing. They feel hopeless and they need healing and they need a purpose and a mission that they've not had. And they're starting to see what happens when people make their own missions and purposes, and it brings about death of a 31-year-old man and a widow woman.
Yeah, and also I wonder, and I don't know if we have this information here at our church, but with the people that did come, the newcomers, I imagine there's a spread there too. For example, people that who still consider themselves Christians and still they would say that their faith is very important to them, but they just haven't gone to church in a really long time. Yeah. Maybe they got disillusioned. Maybe it's church hurt. Maybe it's one of those kind of things. But they still remember. Maybe going to grandma's church or going to church as a kid and the meaning and the purpose, and people cared about them there. And it was a part of that old way that I was raised with, even if I have some reservations about that old way. So just like a kid who, and I don't want to paint people like that as rebellious kids in every respect, but like a kid who has had a estranged relationship with their father, and then someday something happens and they just want their father. They want to run to their father or their mother. I think there's a certain pull in our society among people who were raised with that, but they're not in church now, that when something like September 11th or this happens, that they still profess Christ. And so they're like, man, I need to, kind of like you, this is the time. I need to at least go and run to where I know that grandfatherly figure will be, metaphorically, as the church. And so I think there's some of that there. I don't know what happens. I'd love to know that there's a lot of secularists and atheists that are coming and those sorts of things. But I think that's a big part of it. And I'm not an unbeliever, so I don't know if you met those things that an unbeliever would need, and I haven't been out of church. But without this becoming just a reaction video to your incredible sermon, the reality was you gave them a very obvious and practical way to connect with God and to see God moving in their lives. And for a believer, that would be fasting and prayer and worship. And at One Life, we do incredible worship, so they got that. And so I walked out fulfilled. I even had a moment of tearful, conversation with another church member, which is just the best.
Tearful? Really?
Yeah. And so I just think...
see that coming.
Yeah, and it wasn't really about this, but this kind of prompted it, And so it's just, I think that if someone didn't get it out of church yesterday, then I'm kind of at a loss at what they might have wanted and would love to learn what that is.
Well, and to that point, even yesterday, I almost cried just when we did the final song, and my daughter was there, and she wanted to be picked up, and suddenly after processing, I've had the roller coaster. Everyone who's been at my house knows I've been angry flamethrower 1 second and wanting to break down and sob the next. It's because I'm feeling that weight. And so, but yesterday to see my daughter and just I don't know, I felt super blessed and all that. But the other reason that I'm seeing is, frankly, not to make this all political and cultural, but we are responding to a real cultural issue. One of the other things I've seen with people is that they said that for so long they've heard these people spout oh yeah, love everyone, love everyone, love everyone. But then as soon as one of their opposition dies, they danced on his grave. Yeah. And then they were like, that revealed to me that this wasn't love. That's not love. This isn't the party of love. This isn't the group of I want to be associated with. Oh, these people are holding prayer vigils and mourning as a group of people, even like he was a lost family member if you've never met him. So for a lot of people, that was like, I want to go to that. I want to go to those people who love that way. So I think that was also a wake-up call, is a seeing the spiritual reality of the difference, because you can get so caught up in the language. Language is so powerful, and it can really manipulate people to think this is a good thing over here, just to be exposed to maybe, and I'm not saying it's all about his views, but I think it's just the reaction also kind of exposed that people are like, I want to be with that.
Well, because I think it's Ecclesiastes where it talks about God has put eternity in the hearts of men. I could be way off in where that is, but there's just a pull to the things of the Lord, and when you see the world around you falling apart and the things that you put hope in and trust in and your foundation in, and that crumbles around you, it's like, okay, well, what do I have left? And I think that's where that pull of the Holy Spirit kind of like, okay, try this finally, like that kind of thing. Like in the Old Testament, like the Israelites were always like, okay, yeah, we're going to follow God. And then they would turn away, and he's like, all right, when you come back, I'll be waiting for you. And they always did come back, but it was that like tragedy in their life that brought them back. And I think that's what people are seeing right now. Like, okay, I need that hope that is in there, but I don't know what it is. And so I'm trying to find it.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this or not, but the man who was talking to him last did post on his channel, the one that was at the microphone talking to him when it happened. Came up to disagree with him. He was talking about the trans issue and that whole thing, and he watched it right in front of his face. He was literally the last person to ever talk to him. His reaction was, he was first of all scandalized that people were rejoicing over it because he completely disagreed with him. But he said, I watched someone get murdered right in front of my face, and his whole testimony was that human reality thing. And then all of a sudden, he became human. He became a husband and a father, and I really respected that. The guy showed a lot of class, and a lot of you could see. I mean, he'll be traumatized for the rest of his life because he just saw the whole thing. Speaking of, so we had a good conversation kind of coming into this and our staff that as people were processing this online, and you've seen the extreme reactions, and there was someone who posted on their social media that basically, hey, I'm not a churchgoer, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious, I'm watching this, and I don't know where to go with this because my perception of, I see people dancing on his grave. I know that's wrong, but it looks to me like Christian people are celebrating someone who made fun of this is just her words, made fun of marginalized people and didn't love them, was full of hate, those kinds of things. So I don't get it.
You're talking about in that particular context, not that Charlie made fun of the marginalized, but like that he supported Donald Trump who did. Is that what you're kind of referring to?
No, I mean her perceptions. I'm not reading it because I don't want to out anybody, but the perception is I'm someone that I'm not in the church world, and I don't even know who he is basically, but I care about people. I'm open. I'm respectful towards religious people. I get that. But it feels like there's people over here that are dancing on a grave. There's people over here who are mourning someone that I perceive to be
a hateful person,
a hateful and terrible person. So I don't know where to go from here. I don't like, and then I see they're both fighting.
Yeah.
Coach me on where to go. What's going on with that? And how would you coach someone to navigate through if they're in that spot in life?
Dr. Hunter?
Well, my response to that would be that if you're in a spot like that, that is, number one, a call to, okay, what do you definitely know is true? You definitely know that the celebration of that sort of evil happening to an innocent man, you know that that's evil. You can't, that people celebrating that is, and there's no amount of caveat that makes it okay to celebrate Charlie Kirk's death. And so you know that much, right? So in the meantime, what I would do while you're sitting in that is prayerfully consider in community how to navigate those big questions that do divide us and do lead some to think that Charlie was this incredible example of Christ and others to think that he's this horrible human being. But one thing that I do want to bring out of this is that I don't believe on my theology that God wants or delights in these wicked actions. But what I do believe is that when God allows an evil action to take place, when wicked men do that of their own free will, God will then redeem that in some way and bring something beautiful out of it. For example, my brother is adopted. How he came to be is not something that I think God delights in, because it was a bad situation. But I'll tell you what, God brought something beautiful out of that. He redeemed it. My brother's life and working at a Lifeway Christian bookstore for so long and all these kind of things. So God redeems, and and I don't want to be callous to people that lost Charlie, but one of the things that he's doing to redeem this is it is a clarion call for people to figure this stuff out that they've been lazy about thinking through and to get to church. I'm lazy about thinking things through, but we all got to get to that point where it's, hey, it's time to actually consider this and figure out, because these are some of the most important important issues dividing our nation. And how is it that half of the people are celebrating and half? That's not true, but a lot of people are celebrating and a lot of people are mourning. How is that possible? It's a good call to work through that. But if you don't have the answers, sit in what you do know for sure, and that assassination of an innocent man is evil.
Well, and I think context is key as well, because a lot of times when people either die for the cause or just have different things that are in their life, like, because news is a great example of that. Like, you'll watch Fox News and be like, okay, he said this, and then you watch CNN or MSNBC or whatever, and they're like, oh wait, he said this, and it's like almost completely different spins on things. And so you kind of got to go through the things that they're saying, oh, he said this that's wrong and terrible and all this, and go through and like, okay, well, what's the context of it? How does that flesh out what he actually said? And then, okay, do I agree that what he said is really hateful? And because that was the one thing I appreciate about him, because I watched other people debate, and who's the guy that would sit at the table and be like, this is dumb, change my mind or whatever. And
Steven Crowder,
yeah. And like that guy, I just feel like he was just trying to incite like anger and fights in people.
really?
And
Wow.
I mean, I don't know, but look at him now.
True.
Yeah. So with Charlie Kirk, though, I always I didn't watch him that much either. I would see clips here and there on my feed, but it was always a respectful. And a lot of times he would just ask the person like, okay, where are you coming from on that? Or like, what do you mean by that? Like he would have them define terms to figure out like where they really were. And I thought he did it in a very respectful way. Even if they disagreed, it was still, they walked away both like amicable. Like they both were, it wasn't like the person just stormed off. Like, I can't believe you said that to me. It was like, if they were genuinely willing to listen, he was willing to have the conversation. I appreciated that about him. And so finding that context, I think is.
And there are always examples where Charlie got aggressive with somebody because they were being aggressive, and that's just how conversations sometimes go.
Oh, yeah.
But you're right. The vast majority of them, and in all of them, he was a decent human being to the people he was talking to.
Yeah, I only seen one clip ever actually of him completely losing his temper, and that was on Cenk Uygur. And I was like, of all people, Cenk could easily get that out of people.
Well, yeah.
Like, I love Cenk in that sense of like, he's disagreeable and he's like, I'm like, I love him in that sense that he's a human being, and I disagree with him on a lot of issues. But I'm like, if all people to lose your temper on, I understand why someone would lose it on Cenk. Now, it's like, it's kind of like Andrew Wilson. Like,
Right.
if someone loses their temper on Andrew Wilson, I'm like, I can see why that would happen, because he's so aggressive. And those are two totally different opposite sides of the political aisle. But also, to that point, it's like, understanding, like, for a fact that standing on assassination and dancing on a man's grave who's got two fatherless children now, that's evil and wicked. Now, there are things that Charlie said. I followed Charlie probably closer than, I'm not sure how much you did or you guys did, but I followed him a bit more closely, but not like extremely closely still. I wouldn't say I'm like his number one fan. But I would listen to him, and I wasn't always on board with him. But I could at least articulate his arguments. Like, one of the things as far as context is concerned is I've seen a lot of people say, well, here's a quote of his, I don't believe in empathy. Empathy is a made up word. Okay. But then the full quote then goes, I prefer to use the word compassion. So it's not like you. Now, do I think
Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay. And so it's like, okay. Now, granted, I think the point is kind of semantics. I understand what he's trying to do, but I'm just like, that's kind of silly. But
right.
At the same time, you're taking one half and you're ignoring the where he's trying to bring it to a deeper level.
Let's call it what it is. You're being a little bit deceptive about this, aren't you?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, you're being deceptive. Did he say that literally, the words you said? Okay, yeah. But he also said this, the rest of it. And so what you did was not to lie, but to deceive, which is to lie.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of things like that. Or, he said that, a few gun deaths is worth, that Second Amendment. And it's like, haha, irony, dance on his grave more. But it's like, but he said it in the context of like saying like, okay, for example, cars kill 50,000 people per year. So, but that's a risk we all take. And that's a risk that apparently society as a whole says is willing to take. It's worth 50,000 lives possibly a year to be able to have transportation and the freedom to do so. Same with alcohol. And alcohol doesn't even have any practical usage besides enjoying it, right? So he's like, so the same with a gun. I think that gun deaths are going to be inevitable if you have it, but I think the risks outweigh the reward. Like,
and let's talk about very serious benefits, even beyond a car or something. Someone who thinks that having a gun is going to help them protect themselves, their family, or their community against a potential future corrupt government. Many people think that's worth it. And So one thing with the person that you're talking about, this person who says, hey, I just don't even know kind of how to wrap my heads around this, but I'm here and all that sort of thing. And I look at something like this and I just think, well, okay, then think about the things you're hearing right now on the internet and ask yourself, is that definitely true? I need to go research that, because it may be, if I thought Charlie was a racist or was giving a racist message, I would not have as many good feelings about Charlie Kirk. If I thought he was all the other things that they list off, all the way ending our nation, ending democracy, all these kind of things, I wouldn't be able to support him. I don't think those things. So how is it that a reasonably a well-educated person like those of us sitting here can say we don't think he's those things, and so as a result of that, we're willing to get behind it? And you may have received a deception, a lie on some of those things. You may find that you really do disagree with them. I disagreed with, or I didn't like the way Charlie did a couple of his apologetic moves. Oh, who cares? I mean, come on. So
I've always said that
Which
too.
ones?
He was more Trump than I was too, like, because he was like hardcore MAGA, and I was like, I wasn't ever on board the hardcore MAGA train.
Right.
But I mean, doesn't mean it should cost him his life, nor does it mean that he's somehow terribly immoral, because no matter what, when people, this is to this person, is like, now what do I do from here? It's like, try to understand a little bit, maybe on the opposite side a little bit, and try to steelman it. Like, okay, but for some Christians, like if you were to had to vote, like many people did, some people just chose not to vote, but President Trump or Kamala Harris. Okay, well, now what do? Well, Kamala Harris was pro, trans issues, including like pro-transition treatment for minors, and some of those things. Abortion, she wanted more legislation for freedom of abortion, and then you also had her religious act that could actually clamp down on religious freedom that she voted for. But then you have President Trump with some of the his issues that everyone's well aware of. So it's like you have these where some Christians also felt like no matter what, they were between a rock and a hard place, so they're having to choose a particular poison, and no matter what, they felt like they're voting for a poison. So I'm saying that for this person to think, like, if they're thinking like, oh, this person is mocking these people, and I'm like, keep in mind, a lot of Christians, even if Charlie Kirk was more pro-Trump, a lot of Christians who may have been supportive of Kirk or even voted Trump, some of them did it by like pinching their nose a little bit, because they're like, I would prefer this, I guess, over that, ? I don't know.
Yeah, right.
So that's why we don't want to demonize. That's my point. We don't want to demonize people.
That's a good point. And I think one thing that we should have said by now and should say is to say, I mean,
by now?
Yeah, I think by now we should have
Sorry,
said
I should have opened it.
No, I think we went. I think we should have maybe said this a little bit earlier, and that is that our church and the church doesn't hang or fall on Charlie Kirk either.
Yeah, no.
It's Jesus.
Amen.
And so if you come to a church and you just can't help that you think it's a little weird about all the Charlie Kirk stuff, okay, well, we're doing that because we think that's a fellow brother, and we think it's an amazing story and a powerful story and speaks to a cultural moment. But if you just think it's weird, hey man, look at Jesus. Because this, as much as we love Charlie right now, we want to especially lift up the family in prayer, and all these things are happening. It's ultimately about Jesus and not Charlie.
Bro, what would you say to this lady?
What would you say?
No, I mean, we listen to Will and
I
Braxton.
think some of it is, and I would say this to anybody, that there's a huge need for what I label intellectual integrity in our dialogue. Is that, and I use the example as staff. I saw years ago, I saw a documentary that was meant to attack Mormonism. And I don't believe Mormonism is true. I think there's a lot to the attack and all the rest. However, this documentary was just absolutely ridiculous in the accusations they were making against that. So, and I read a book by a fairly prominent preacher one time attacking Islam. I'm not an Islam fan at all. I did ministry in those parts of the world. There's a lot of things to go after and argue with. However, he did a terrible job, misrepresented what they actually think, and all the rest. So even if you don't agree with something, you need to have the integrity to find out, okay, am I hearing right? And we all have to accept the fact. And this person sounds thoughtful enough. I would say, okay, first of all, back up and find out, what did he say? Listen to him in context. Is that what he was saying? At that point, assess. You've already said, to your point, I don't believe this guy, even if he was this, he didn't deserve to get murdered and then have people dance about it. My goodness. So you've got a great starting place. But am I just getting soundbite him or real him? And I guess I wanted to ask you guys, when it came to those of you who did listen to him, would you sit one of your kids in front of him for an hour and let him talk and feel okay?
Yeah, I wouldn't feel like they would. It'd take a lot.
You disagree with some stuff. I mean, but would you?
Yeah, I'd be.
I think your daughter was a fan.
I found out that one of my daughters was listening to him quite regularly, and as a result of it, it was a powerful moment, in our family to talk about these things. And so, I mean, obviously, a kid needs to be old enough. There's some sensitive stuff discussed, but yeah.
So, and I guess in that sense, it starts with intellectual integrity and just being fair to people, no matter what you think of them to start, and then develop whatever you think wherever you think things should go from there. And to your point, though, you have to get to the heart of what the gospel is itself. And to Charlie Kirk, what I did know about him, he always said things like, hey, relationship with Jesus is the number one thing in life, and he would send people there consistently. That was that's not what Donald Trump does. I mean, he doesn't know how, but but Charlie Kirk would do that.
Yes.
And he would kind of take things to that basic call.
People ask him, like, hey, what would be the number one thing you want someone to take away when they talk to you? He's like, I want them to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and they should, get married and have a family or something like that. Like, so it was like, and even though I would disagree with them, but again, it's like some of these issues are very difficult.
You don't think they should have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ?
Yeah, no, yeah, of course I do. But I'm saying there's other issues. Sorry, no, don't you dare throw this table at you.
Soundbite.
Because
I would agree with them.
Speaking of context,
no kidding. Like, I wouldn't always agree with them, but the thing is, like, I don't think that whenever you're wrestling politics, economy, and stuff like that, some of those are really complicated. So we need to stop villainizing people on that, and then also you need to stop demonizing people, for example, who hold to a traditional Christian ethic, like when it comes to Christian views of sexuality that they taught for 2,000 years. It doesn't make them a bigot, just makes them Christian. Same with all the Abrahamic religions teach the same sexual ethic. It's no one's saying you have to be a Christian. We think you should be, but no one's saying you have to be. So again,
and it's like Islam is getting a free pass on that thing
all the time.
It's like that's bizarre. That's a whole
really
strange.
Because we're more tolerant of that. If we can use that word, I don't really like it, but because it's kind of more.
It's fascinating that people do that. It's a whole other subject. But in the end, it is about being responsible to the beliefs that are actually out there and thinking them through for what they really truly are. And do I believe that Jesus really did rise again from the dead, and he's maybe being represented? But that's the subject that I need to get to and get to his personality. And did Charlie Kirk express that perfectly? Most decidedly not, I would assume.
Any of us?
At times. Do I know?
Have any of us ever done it perfectly?
Chris has. But he's the one that's
He did that one time.
Can't help
He did that one time.
He did it perfectly.
He did that one time. And then I've noticed, and this is a whole other can of worms, but I have noticed, like on the racism thing, I mean, I helped start an organization that fought racism and does that. I feel very passionately about that subject. But I have noticed that terms have changed. Mm-hmm. And you can be considered racist for certain ways of looking at things versus what was classically defined as racist in the past. Because it is defined differently by Martin Luther King than it is kind of modern, so that can happen to you as well. So that's why the intellectual integrity thing is so important. So where do we go from here, though? What would you recommend to either anybody out there that's coaching any Christians or whatever? What's kind of a final word on, or not final word, but where do we go from here? How do you step it out?
For Christians, I would say get a fire in your belly and just get out there and start doing kingdom work. Yeah. Stop sitting on the sidelines. If you've been sitting on the sidelines, stop. Get involved. If you've been prioritizing other things, quit those other things and get involved in your local church. Yeah. You want to be, we all hate the hate that we see, right? We all hate the hate that we see and all the death. All right, be part of the change.
Yeah. There's a few moments in my life where I felt like I either got a new position or something happened where now I felt more invigorated and could see myself working harder, doing more. I feel inspired in that same way. I heard a young guy came into his dad and said, I need to be more like Charlie. And to tell you the truth, he was 13 years younger than me, but there's some ways I need to be more like Charlie.
Yeah. Well, it's true. And I do admire the fact that there was two things that came out since I have watched. Just number one, he had a heart for college students, and he showed up on campuses and started talking to them. I mean, say what you want about that, but he did that and it cost him his life. And then 2, they said he was unfailingly kind to everybody he was ever around. I did hear that from people who knew him behind the scenes, not just as a public figure, but they just said it was just his style. He was always super energetic, very optimistic guy that just took a great interest in other people. So we can be like Charlie in that way. And for that reason, his death is even that much more painful, because there was somebody out there like that. And so hopefully we can reach that ourselves. So thanks for keep up the conversation. Please let us know what you think in the comments, and ask questions or push back or whatever else, because we need to have these dialogues. I think that's what people are hungry for, is just a responsible, solid, intellectually honest conversation.
And remember, everyone is made in the image of God, so you don't hate them when you disagree. Continue.
Exactly. Amen. See you.